Hello everyone. In our last lesson, we were introducing all sorts of definitions about data and talking about the data career space field in general. Now we're going to focus on specifically the systems we use to actually store and access data. We'll begin by talking about data management systems. So a database management system, or DBMS, handles the storage, retrieval, and updating of data within a computer system. And while many types exist, we're going to focus on the most relevant for our statistical data structures that we're going to be using, generally focusing on statistical analysis. So the main one that's used, and this is the most commonly used one for most things, are relational databases, or RDBMS. So this is the most common type of database for structured data, utilizing tables and specifically SQL, which is structured query language. Then you have NoSQL, which is optimized for specific requirements like flexible schemas and what's called horizontal scaling. And we'll talk more about all of this later. You also have hierarchical and network, which are older models that use tree-like or interconnected graph structures. You've got object-oriented management systems, which store data as objects. This is similar to the structures that are used in R and Python when you're using those systems for programming. And then one of the newer databases, not really the database type itself is not new, but it's more commonly used nowadays, are vector databases. These are designed to store and query high-dimensional embeddings. So in context of statistics, these are essential for modern AI applications where data is represented as a vector in high-dimensional space. And then from that, you can go out and gather what you need based on what you're trying to do. We're going to start first by focusing on hierarchical database structures. So this model organizes data into tree-like structures with a single parent node for each record. So the structure is that the data is stored as records connected by links and then moving from a root node down to the leaf nodes. So for example, let's say we have here a university system. So the university is that root node. And then from that, there are two child nodes to it, department and administration. The administration is one of our leaf nodes where it ends. That's part of the structure. In department, though, this is now a node that branches off into three other nodes: students, faculty, and resources. So, for example, in the department, you will have certain faculty that are part of that department. That department is part of the university. So your university might be ours, and let's say the department is mathematics and statistics. Then the faculty would be people like me who are part of that department, which is a part of our university. Another department, let's say social sciences, would have a different group of faculty in their child node of that part of the database. So the constraint, though, with these is that they are very rigid, and a child node cannot be more than one parent, or part of more than one parent. So let's say that you had a dual enrollment. You are a student who is a dual major between math and philosophy. Well, in this structure, you have to be placed in one or the other. You are either a math student, part of the math department, or you are a philosophy student, part of the philosophy department. This actually can be expanded then into a network database structure. So it's an evolution of the hierarchical model that allows for more complex relationships. So it's a graph-based model where child nodes can have multiple parents. It allows more flexibility, so it better represents many-to-many relationships, such as a student being part of both departments and a club. So now looking at our example here, we have our university, which again breaks into department and administration. This department still has nodes of student, faculty, and resources, but now you also have this club node. And the people in this club could be part of the students, part of the faculty, and also part of the resources that the university or the department specifically has. So in this case, that student could be a part of this department and also a part of a club. And of course, you could have this as different departments as well. You could have a student who branches off from multiple departments, things like that. So this is useful in representing complex relational networks or social data where simple trees will fail. Next, we have object-oriented structure. So this model will store data in objects rather than tables. This will closely match the way we handle data, again, in R or Python. So we have classes and we have attributes. So data is grouped into classes, for example, person, with specific attributes like name and address. And then each specific class, let's say in this case, student or professor, inherit attributes from general parent class. So looking at this sort of table we have here on the side, we've got person That person has a name, phone number, and address associated with them. If we look to the left, this is of type, which means what type of person are they? They're a student. If they're a student, it has their roll number, their average grades, and are they eligible to enroll in a course. If the type of to the right is a professor, this database might have information on their salary and or their qualifications. Do they have a PhD or not? And then if we look below, lives at, this would be the address. So you have this person, which could represent both students and faculty. Every one of those people have an associated address with street, city, state, postal code, and country. But then you also will have this branching off logic based on the object of if they're a student, you have this information. If they're a professor, they have this information. And this is kind of how we store things when we're using R. It is an object-based language. When we create objects, you have certain attributes and data that you associate with them that can be called on and actually part of bigger objects, sub-objects, things like that. So this maps directly again to how R handles list objects or how Python manages classes, making the bridge between database and the code very short. And this is why I mentioned previously that oftentimes when you're like learning SQL, once you have a little bit of background in data, it's pretty easy to pick up because it's going to be very similar to what you're already using. In fact, it translates very closely when you're using R to access, for example, a SQL database. Next, we have relational databases. So relational databases are basically the industry standard for structured data. They're structured to recognize relationships between stored items of information through what are called linked tables. So it has a tabular structure where data is organized into tables with predefined schemas, which consist of rows, which are the records, and columns, which are the attributes. So this means that for every event, there will be a row, which is, again, the record of that event. This could be a sale in a system. And then you're going to have your columns. These are the attributes. Could be things like date of purchase, how much was spent, what items, things like that. Then there'll be a key-based relationship. So the tables are connected using primary and foreign keys to ensure data integrity and reduce redundancy. So this is called normalization. This is something that's used a lot of times because, again, when you're storing data, you have to consider that if you are gathering every little thing, you have a lot of redundancy, you're going to be using up a lot of space. A lot of times you're going to want to have something that is both reliable and also efficient. So this is using, specifically focusing on something called structured query language, which is SQL. This is the universal interface for data definition, manipulation, and retrieval. Most companies use SQL. I know people who work at, for example, like Raymond James, and they use SQL. I know people who work in all sorts of industries. Almost every industry will use SQL, so you'll probably want to know this. So some popular systems will include open source objects like PostgreSQL, MySQL, or SQLite, as well as enterprise solutions, things like Oracle or Microsoft SQL Server. In fact, my experience personally with SQL is I originally learned using SQLite, which every one of these systems are SQL, but they're going to have differences in them. For example, SQLite does not have, I believe it's right joins, whereas in SQL Server does. It has left and right joins and things like that. Currently, for my systems that I've been using PostgreSQL for almost all of my operations. And which one you use will be partially based on what your company or whatever you have access to uses, what you feel most comfortable with, and sometimes which one will work best for whatever it is you're trying to do. Now, some benefits of this kind of system is that it has high accuracy, it's easy to collaborate because, again, it's the industry standard, so more people know how to use it than other systems generally, and it doesn't have a very high bar of entry comparatively, and it has strong data integrity. But there are some limitations. So you can face physical storage constraints and decreased performance in data sets as they scale to massive volumes. So the problem with, for example, SQL is that it has a horizontal structure. So the more data you get, the bigger and bigger the structure gets, the longer it takes to access that data because it has to go through all the rows. It doesn't have what's called a horizontal structure, which means that it allows it to expand or scale quickly. So this is, of course, its limitation. It's used by many companies, but oftentimes when you get to a certain point, it actually can become a bottleneck. And then here's some more examples of different ones. We've got Oracle Database, MySQL. These are just emblems you can see here. The benefits for simplicity, ease of use, accuracy, data integrity, normalization, and again, collaboration. Limitations, maintenance difficulty. It can be difficult to maintain, especially as the system gets older and continues to grow. It can become costly, again, as it continues to grow. You might run into issues with physical storage. It has a lack of scalability. It does not scale well, depending on how much data you're getting. Complexity and structure. This can actually grow out of hand very quickly. An example of this, I worked for a company and we were working on building out a system. And as we built out the system, the schema for it got more and more and more and more complex to the point where it actually became very difficult for our back-end developers to maintain. And of course, it can have decreased performance over time. Now let's talk about vector database structure. So vector database differs from traditional systems by storing data in mathematical coordinates or embeddings rather than rows and columns. So these embeddings are the raw data, things like text, images, or even SQL outputs, and it's transformed into a high-dimensional vector via an embedding model. So this model has a way that it embeds them, giving them sort of coordinates on this vector space. And then with that, data can be plotted in a high-dimensional space where the distance represents statistical or semantic similarity. Notice that I have distance in quotes. This is actually on purpose, and this is because how do you measure distance? Some might use what's called Euclidean distance, which is just, think of rise over run. You have 2 points, you know what the distance is between them, you do the change in y over the change in x. But you could also have things like Manhattan distance, Mahalanobis distance. There's different types of distance that you might want to use based on whatever it is you're actually looking at and how you were defining it. For example, if I'm looking at a mapping company and I'm trying to figure out how to, set up routes from point A to point B, it doesn't matter to me if the destination is 13 miles away because that's not the distance I'm going to drive, right? If I have a grid view of streets, how far would it actually be for me to actually take those streets to get where I'm going, not just as the crow flies, as it were. So instead of exact keyword match, the system will find what's called the nearest neighbor using distance function like cosine similarity. And this is something I have a lot of experience with as well, is how do you describe what's similar? Specifically when you're doing a lot with natural language processing. Oftentimes you're looking for similarity between things, and it might be word overlap, it might be things like that. And what you're doing is you're using these word vectors to try to determine how close they are to a match. So this is crucial for dynamic modeling, model validation, and detecting overfitting in complex data sets through simulation. The next thing we're going to look at is NoSQL. Now, based on the name, you might think that it's not SQL, but it actually means not only SQL. So it has all the functionality of SQL, but more. So it does not use a tabular schema of rows or columns. It will use storage model. It's a storage model optimized for the specific requirements of the data being stored. So it might be, for example, key value, could be wide column, could be graph, could be document based. So this is why it's not only SQL. It can, in fact, replicate exactly what SQL does or is, but it also can have other schema or storage methods that SQL does not have. It allows you to have flexible schemas. It will allow for horizontal scaling, which means that it's actually a lot better for scaling up than SQL is. And these would be things like Cassandra, MongoDB, HBase, Redis, and plenty of others. I've mentioned schema quite a few times. So let's talk about what a database schema is. So a schema is just a formal structure of a database described in a language supported by one of our database management systems. It serves as a blueprint for how the database is constructed and organized. So what it does is it refers to the organization of the data. So think of it like a blueprint where it's going to tell you how the data is actually connected, constructed, and where data goes. So the types of schema you might encounter are a logical schema, which defines the logical constraints and data organization, such as an organization of data into tables in SQL. You could have a physical schema, which describes how the data is actually stored in a storage medium. Or you could have something like a view schema, which defines how the data is viewed at the application or user level. An example of this would be SQL. SQL uses a logical schema. Specifically, we describe them using what is called an ER diagram. So let's actually talk about that then. An ER diagram, or an entity relationship diagram, is used to visualize this logical schema. So what we're doing is we're using entity relationship between our different entities and how they're related to each other. And I'll talk more about these little arrows in a second. These are crucial for people like statisticians to understand what's called the chain of custody and connection of the data before we start merging tables in either R or Python. So each of these will include the entity. This is an object or concept about which data is being stored. So in this case on the right, we have apparel size, we have product categories, product color, and categories. You've got attributes. These are specific property or characteristic of an entity. So this would, of course, in this case, the product is our entity. You've got these different attributes. And then the relationship, how entities interact or connect with one another. For this interaction, we have different cardinalities which describe the nature of that connection. We have one-to-one, we have one-to-many, many-to-one, and other ones like that. So looking at our table over here, whenever you see a line touching one of the entities, that would be one. Where you see it split into three, that is many. So looking from product to apparel size, this would be a one-to-many because there's one product, but it can have many different sizes. So let's say we have a shirt. That shirt could be small, medium, large, extra large, 2X, things like that. So this is a one-to-many relationship. This style of shirt has many different sizes. This style of shirt has many different colors. These colors can have many different IDs, stuff like that. Many to one would be the relationship in the other way. If I'm looking at what shirts do I have that are yellow, then I could have many different, many different things associated with just that one shirt, right? So this one shirt has many different colors. If we're looking the other direction, if I have one product, it could have, it could be part of many other things that are connected to some attribute or entity. You could also have many to many. This would be something like if I have a whole variety of products that are associated with a whole variety of colors. This would be something like if I sell like water bottles and I've got different sizes, 16 ounces, 32 ounces, and I've got a variety of colors, but every size bottle can be any color. So I can say, okay, well, I want the 32 ounce in pink, I want the 32 ounce in gray, I want the 16 ounce in pink, I want the 16 ounce in gray. So this would be a many to many connection because for each of the many options of bottles, they have each of the many connections in color. So again, looking at this image here, this is what an ER diagram would look like. This describes the relationship of that data. So from this is how you would determine how to make the SQL queries that you're interested in, right? So you might look up and you want to do a search on product based on apparel size or based on colors or based on apparel size and color. And then from that, you could pull the data specific to what you're looking for using the commands you would learn while doing SQL. So that's it for our discussion on database management systems. In our next lesson, we're going to then look into what happens when you get into the scale of big data. Everybody loves to talk about big data. Now it's time to look at some of the considerations you have to have when you get to that scale. Thank you for watching. To continue learning, click the linked video here for the next lesson. If there's a topic you'd like me to cover, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.